Well, this session was sponsored by Bashan, and I've got to remind you that today, as with yesterday, to focus more on the content, we will not be having any particular tea break, but there will be rolling tea and coffee every time you want. It's just in the foyer area. Please feel free to help yourselves, grab your cup of cheer, and come back right in. The next session is going to focus on Global Beans Outlook, color beans, and that session is sponsored by Intertech. So let's get ready to welcome this next panel. Two of them were already on stage, so you know them well. Please welcome once again back to the podium, Dr. Randall Fairman, sorry, Doctor. Dr. Fairman, as I told you earlier, has done his PhD and his doctorate from the prestigious MIT. And of course, he now uses statistical methods and leadership in project management as a consultant. He also mentors young entrepreneurs who want to get into the China market. So back again, Dr. Fairman. Also, Kassahun Bekele from Ecos, Argentina. Happy, smiling gentleman. Great deal of experience, first with the government agencies. Sorry. Thank you. Yes, I simply put you to another country. All right, Ethiopia, my apologies. But thank you once again for that wonderful smile and also bringing your experience onto the stage. Up next is a gentleman who is now on the U.S. Dry Bean Council of USA and represents the U.S. Dry Bean Council of USA at the GP Confederation. He's had over 35 years' experience with Keller Bean, one of the largest originators of Great Northern Bean in the United States, Judd Keller. An international pulse broker, he's the president of the Brazilian Dry Bean Institute, also known as IBRAFE. He's director of Jorepar Corretora de Mercadorias since '94. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marcelo Eduardo Luders. A lawyer by qualification, he is now the CEO of Lazara SA Argentina, which is a food broking company. He was the former president of the Global Pulse Confederation, and president of the Argentinian Chamber of Pulses 3 times, Jose Maria Lazara. He is the founder, owner, and managing director of Nanjing Bongaro International Trading, a man with a wonderful memory. Nanjing Bongaro is into processing and trading of pulses, legumes, grains, and oil seeds. Ladies and gentlemen, Weihua Meng. That concludes the panel, completes it rather, and now it's time to hand it over to the panel. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, hello again. So it's great to be here on this panel. We're going to start off talking about speckled beans, and then we'll go through the reds and the black beans. You know, one of the things that strikes me about the speckled bean industry is that Brazil has 2 million tons per year of consumption of speckled beans. Currently, that's carioca beans. And I look forward, Marcelo will share with us a little bit about how it came to be, but I think he said 1970, there was essentially no carioca beans. And now there's 2 million tons that have been developed and consumed in Brazil. And it's really quite a remarkable story of how that came to be and where it might go in the future. If you look at North America, you have Canada and the USA at 570,000 tons per year, and that's primarily domestically consumed. Mexico, 340,000 tons. Argentina with mainly the cranberry beans at 17,000 tons. And then historically in China, you've had light speckled kidney beans for export at 98,000 tons over the last 3 years, but it has been up to 300,000 tons in the past. So putting this into perspective on a chart, you can see that Brazil by far dominates the overall production of speckled beans in the world. If you take Brazil out of the picture to look at the supply that's available outside of Brazil, you can see that Mexico, USA, China, and Canada are the main players for the speckled beans. If you look at the history of China, you'll see the number of speckled beans they produce have been going down, as with the other varieties. It'll be interesting to hear the perspective on those things from our Chinese representative. And so in 2017, you can see the North American crop, USA and Canada, was very large, and there's a significant carryover into 2018, and the 2018 crop appears to be smaller. Looking at just the cranberry bean swath of it, you get a much smaller worldwide production picture, with China, over on the west of China in Xinjiang province, they have a nice cranberry bean that's really appreciated in many places, and that's pretty stable right now at 25,000 tons. Then you have Canada, Argentina, and the USA rounding out the cranberry bean supply. So this year, the total production is a little bit up from last year, but in general, it looks like it's stable. So for the speckled beans, you have the Mexico pinto bean planting is slightly up from last year. The US and Canada pinto bean carryover is pretty significant. The cranberry bean supply and demand looks pretty stable. And this year's Brazilian crop is above average, I understand, but there's always weather questions this time of year. So moving to the dark red kidney beans, around the world, historically, you've had the major producers being the United States and Canada, Argentina, and China. Putting those onto a graph year over year, you can see that 2013, 14, and 15, there was a growing supply. 2015, we had significant carryover into 2016 and 17. And so here the situation for this year's dark red kidney beans is that the overall production worldwide is slightly up from last year. The carryover from 2017 to 2018 will be less than last year. And so probably the overall supply, when you consider the carryover and everything else, is going to be similar in 2018 to what it was in 2017. Now, if you look at the red piece on this graph, you'll see that the China production of dark red kidney beans was in the 50 to 60,000 ton range as early as little as 3 years ago, and now it's at half of that. And so it's another area to think about. What does the future of the dark red kidney bean supply from China look like? And then with Canada, Argentina, and the USA there. But on the balance globally, this year's production is slightly up from last year, and the carryover is a little bit less, so it's pretty much the same. You know, there's a note on here that says the carioca crop could suppress demand on dark red kidney beans, which at the beginning looks like a grammatical mistake. But what we've seen is that the Brazilian people, when they don't have the carioca bean or when the carioca bean is expensive, they tend to swap other varieties in. And so if the carioca, last year there was about 10,000 tons of dark red kidney beans from Argentina to Brazil. And if Brazil has a good crop of carioca, maybe that number would go down. The European demand, in 2013, when the Argentina crop failure happened, we saw an increase in dark red kidney bean demand in 2014 and 15 that I thought that the market was growing in Europe, but it seems like it's come back down to about what it was before, at around 100,000 tons. And then as I said before, the 2018 carryover is less than 2017, and the 2018 harvest is greater, so it looks like it's going to be stable. The light red kidney beans, essentially you've got Canada and the USA, Argentina, and then Panama and Colombia. Looking at it on a graph, you have light red kidney beans this year. The total production will be down from last year. And there's not as much carryover as there is with the dark red kidney beans. And so it looks like the overall, one thing I forgot to mention there is that in North America, most of these light red kidney beans between the US and Canada are consumed in North America. Argentina, the majority of them are exported. So the North American demand is steady. The 2018 harvest is slightly down from 2017. If you look at the general carryover from 2017 to 2018, it appears to be less than last year. So, I mean, it looks to me that it's potential that we could be a little bit short on supply in light red kidney beans, but it'll be interesting to hear the panel's perspective on that. So finally, we'll talk a little bit about black beans. Around the world, you've got the US and Canada producing an average of around 260,000 tons. Mexico producing around 430,000 tons. Brazil with 460,000 tons. And Argentina somewhere around 165,000 tons average. Over the last 3 years, China has been about 65,000 tons. If you were to go back about 7 or 8 years, you would see they were steadily at 250,000 tons. So the Chinese black bean tendency has also gone down. So here's the combined black bean supply picture. You can see that as far as we can tell, 2018, the total sum of all these players is going to be just a little bit up from 2017. Argentina is a little bit up. The USA is a little bit up. China is a little bit down. And the overall result is a slightly higher supply in 2018, of course, weather permitting. And currently, it feels like the supply is strong. And so we would expect the current trends to continue. One note I wanted to make on this is that when you look at Brazilian black bean historical stock, generally they've been producing since 2012 the majority of what they consume, and they import 100 to 200,000 tons. But if you look back in 2012, they imported 300,000 tons. So what happens is, as the black bean prices go down, there comes a point where, for the Brazilian farmer, it no longer makes sense to grow a black bean. And so in the rest of the places that grow black beans, it's usually one crop per year. But in Brazil, every 4 months, they make a planting decision. So if the price of black beans gets to a point where it no longer makes sense for the Brazilians to plant, we could see a sudden surprising demand. So that's just something to keep in mind, that you're always 4 months away from a huge demand from Brazil. And that was why I put this chart up there. So for the outlook, Brazil's overall planting is slightly up from 2017. Mexico's planting is slightly up from 2017. The other producers seem like they're around the same as 2017. And the North American domestic consumption is improving. It didn't show up on the slides, but if you look at the history of the US and Canada domestic consumption, you'll see that there is a fairly steady increase in the consumption of black beans in North America. And so, with that, I'll turn it over to Judd for our panel meeting.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Very good presentation on the data for the different countries in the world. We appreciate that. We're going to open up by discussing with each panel member a question that will stimulate them to go ahead and give more detail. And I'd like to start with Jose Maria. And the question is, describe Argentina's planting conditions and expectations for the new crop.
Hello? No. Thank you, Judd. Good morning, everybody. It's a good question. You know, in Argentina, we entirely depend on weather conditions, so it means we are never aboard. We have to look at the sky every morning, and early in the morning. Up to now, what we can say is that the planting intention was as expected, and the crop develop is a bit contradictory, because we have some areas with good weather conditions and good develop, and some others which weather was not very fair. But still, we have 2 weeks to go. So if weather permit, we expect to have some figures, or similar figures, than last season. Focus mainly on 3 main varieties, which is dark red kidney, with approximately 20,000 tons for exporting, light red kidney with 10,000 tons, and cranberry with around 15,000 tons. You know, Argentina in the last few years has started a very important process of diversification. Argentina was a traditional exporter of white alluvial beans and black beans. And some years ago, it was a very big effort from producers and exporters to diversify varieties, focus on these 3, mainly the 3 varieties like dark, light, and black, and cranberries. We have a moderate growth, but up to now, between these 3 varieties, Argentina already reached export volume of 50 to 60,000 tons, which show us that Argentina came to stay. So the idea is to keep growing on that, and of course, we hope that weather condition or St. Peter's technology will join us, and we can have this year something similar to last season.
Do you have some slides on the production?
Yeah, I have some. I have some slides. I have a couple of slides there, where you can see in these 3 varieties, from 2014 to 2017, we grow 83% in these 3 varieties. That's what I mentioned before, the efforts to on the process of diversification. We are more or less flat on the light red kidney, close to 10,000 tons, but a good sign on dark red kidneys and cranberry beans. And if the market joins us, we are optimists to keep growing. In the next slide we have available, you will see the main destinations. So in these varieties, where it can be seen that the market is really diversified in all continents. The quality of Argentina was approved from European countries, like Asian countries, Middle East countries, and of course our neighbors. So it seems that Argentina is, as I said before, is coming to stay in the market for these varieties.
Well, good. I think then we'll kind of direct the next question towards Argentina's large export customer, Brazil. And Marcelo, I'd like to have you kind of make comments on Brazil being one of the largest producers and largest consumers in the world. How do you see in the future per capita consumption in Brazil?
Morning, all. The consumption, we have good indications that we can have more consumption per capita, increase this consumption. Because until now, never we had the one campaign to convincing the people about how important is in his life the pulses or beans. And now we have this conscious in the government, for example, because the people get a weight and lose the health. And it's important to the government to collaborate to improve this consumption per capita in Brazil. I believe this will happen in few years.
Good. I know worldwide, and this is for all pulse items, there's a real drive to show people how healthy and good pulses are for you, and they're a low cost of protein. So I think a lot of us are all trying to push that factor, and you have to get the government involvement to move that forward. We'll direct our next question to Meng. from China. And the question will be, we have seen a change in decreasing production, particularly in the last 4 years in China, and what appears to be an increase in domestic consumption. That was brought up to Randy during the white bean panel discussion. How do you see the future for China becoming more of an import market for dry beans?
Thank you, Judd. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I think China market will transfer from the export market to the import country. Because, you know, we have some government sources from 2010. We export all China kidney beans is 750,000 metric tons. But 2017, we only export 270,000 metric tons. The market decline maybe around 50%. So it's a big challenge for China beans export. Also, the local consumption of the domestic market increased year by year. Just now, Fairman say maybe China import the white beans in near future, 3 years. I agree. Because you know, actually we see China from 2010 import the beans. This also from official date is 2,100 metric tons. But 2017 we import from about 8,000 metric tons. So it's big change. The market will change. Even if we have some good product for top export market, such as ASKB for India, but also every year is decline. Europe for dark red kidney beans for Italian market is our second top export market, but you know, also decline. Before, China dark red kidney beans is very competitive because of the less the cracked beans. But now in Shanxi province, we use the machine instead of the hand-pick selection. So the cracked beans also too much. So I think maybe in the future we also import the dark red kidney beans from Argentina, from America, and Canada.
Thank you. I have a question now for Kassahun. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right? Got it right. I've been practicing. Well, I was going to ask you the question, do you see color beans become a greater share of the opium production? And also addressing the fact about what kind of maybe difficulties you have on the export market. There's several different things that I think that are involved. So if you'd like to talk on that, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm very much surprised that the Africa continent as a continent is not really shown when it comes to color beans. That could be true, but in the context of Ethiopia, we haven't discussed the smaller version of red kidney beans. I know about dark red kidney beans. We also produce dark kidney beans, but the volume we export and the production doesn't warrant to be really shown here. But when it comes to the smaller version, we call it small red kidney beans, which we produce in huge quantities, in fact. Although a good portion of it is meant for local consumption, we export a huge volume, especially to India, Pakistan, Russia, and Middle East, and Kenya as well. But very recently, because of some kind of regulation imposed by the Indian government, I want to hear from you, gentlemen and ladies here. It has already been stipulated and by the Indian government, any kind of agricultural products being imported into the Indian market, it is a must. It must be treated with methyl bromide, which is already banned by most of the countries under Montreal Agreement. This being the case, and the deadline is coming June, end of June. After that, we have already been told and instructed that any kind of agricultural product destined to Indian market must underlined be treated with methyl bromide. We find this regulation a bit difficult to implement because our country, being a co-signatory of the Montreal Agreement, still, stalling on that issue. In fact, we haven't decided, but our minister and a colleague from GPC and Ato Theodros from our side has been to India to discuss with the relevant ministerial offices as to how to really go about it, and they have been very adamant, saying that it is a must, and it's really this regulation applies across the board. I'm not quite sure about that. Number one, that is the other issue is, to be honest with you, to give you certain figure about our export volumes as a whole, red kidney beans, small version of red kidney beans, in Ethiopia, we allot 240,000 hectares of land for the production of this specific crop. Almost 2/3 of the production is meant for local consumption, but the remaining 1/3 is really meant for export. And in the past, as I said, the main export destinations are Pakistan, India, and then Kenya, and Middle East countries as well, in fact. Now, that is one issue. I hope with this newly action plan from Global Pulse Confederation, if it is going to be implemented, it will definitely create a very level ground for all of us. But let's see when it's going to be implemented. Secondly, when it comes to Pakistan, Pakistan has already banned the import of red kidney bean from Ethiopia because of fungus-related problems. With the collaboration of the ambassador of Pakistan in Ethiopia and the Ethiopian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Agriculture, they are really making a huge effort to address this issue, and I hope within the coming few months we will start exporting to Pakistan as well. So we have got an export, but when it comes to the other colored beans like pinto, light speckled beans, which we produce, red speckled beans, black beans, the quantity doesn't warrant really to be discussed here, but Africa is there in the production of this, and the area allotted to these colored beans is bound to increase. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and address the subject on U.S. and Canada, and what I'd like to kind of give a low view of the supply-demand on the crop coming up. We have to keep two things in perspective. One, it's not planted yet, so we're all working on speculation. And number two, as Marion Hunt said, this year with low prices, the growers have not been very receptive to contracting. They've looked to some other things, and we've had drops in acres. And in some cases, that has, I think, been beneficial. Looking at pinto beans, we had a very large crop last year. We're going to have a large carryover, but with the drop in production, which could be 20–25%, we still have to see how it comes out, that'll make a better balance on supply-demand. We should come out of the 2018 crop in better shape than people anticipated. Looking at black beans, our guess is we're going to have about the same production as last year. You have a large increase in black beans in North Dakota and a decrease in Michigan. So I think we're going to have sort of a balancing act between those two regions. I think part of this is that our major export market is Mexico. When we look at the dynamics of our supply-demand, U.S. consumption has skyrocketed dramatically in the last 20 years. We're now probably using the equivalent of maybe 150,000 metric tons domestically. One problem we have is we're never quite sure what it is. And then the second major part to our whole supply demand is Mexico. They are our major market. So it really depends on Mexico's demand, and that can vary from year to year depending on their own crop. But getting back to this year, because of last year, Mexico really driving at North Dakota for supply. And the reason was that you had a better price, there's a different tier of pricing between the Michigan and the North Dakota black beans. And the North Dakota are cheaper. And I think the feeling was, I was told by many Mexican buyers that they thought that the quality on the North Dakotas were equal to the Michigan, and you had a cheaper base price, and also the freight to the border out of Michigan is probably 50 cents a hundredweight higher. So it's not only the differential in market, it's also a freight value too. It impacts the destination border price on the black beans. Canada, looking at the Canadian number though, where I think in the US we're going to be very balanced and even with last year's crop, I think the Canadians will be off a few acres. And, but it's not going to be a major impact. I think we're going to have a balanced supply. Looking at dark red kidneys, if you go into the market right now in the US and Canada, it's hard to find any dark red kidneys. For lack of a better statement, they're pretty well sold out. Yet we're sitting here in May, and new crop doesn't show up till really October. So it's going to be a very dry session between. Looking at new crop, there'll be a very slight uptick in planting and hopefully production, but that still is lower than the potential demand that we're going to see. So we tend to see those markets be very tight. The market has crept up this year, and I think we're going to start out at a higher level on the coming crop, just very defensively because we know the supply-demand is more on the demand side. Light red kidneys are really a small item in the U.S. comparatively, and it's sort of a niche market. There's only so many users of light red kidney. As Randy said, it's really mainly domestic consumption. Then there'll also be some exports into the Caribbean and also Central America. We have Panama as a customer. Different countries in the Caribbean are a customer. Of course, we're competing with Belize. They have their trade agreements, and we have areas where we have a tariff barrier against us. And until the Belizeans run out of their light red kidneys, we're pretty much stuck out of the market. So looking at that again, we're going to look at down production. We see that already. And then very little carryover, and again, another tight year, and also prices that have reached a high level and will probably open in the coming year at that same level. And now I'd like to turn to the panel and say, anybody want to make any other statements or any more information? Any ideas? Well, I guess we can go to the questions. All right. First question we'll look at is the drought in Brazil serious? Would it take down the yields? Marcelo, can you answer that?
Yes, exactly on this moment, this week is an important week, important time, because the growers looking the result this dry weather. And it's true, we losing around 60,000, 8,000 tons in the Paraná state. Maybe the growers in the center-east can seed something under irrigation, but this is not normal, and it's not easy to take the seeds on this time with this situation. And it's true, we have one trouble in black beans, yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a look at the next question. With China down in black bean production, who will be supplying Cuba, Venezuela, and Costa Rica? Meng, do you have an idea on that?
Actually, for Cuba still have a firm demand. But, you know, for 2018, we estimate the total quantity for black beans is 60,000 metric tons. So we have enough competitive supply for this country, no any problem. But, you know, for above this country is normally for the political government supporting.
Okay, well, thank you, Meng. Next question. What is the price level for Brazilian beans for export? There's a lot of production, but prices are usually high. What is your view? Any thoughts on that?
The second.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and use be the second one down. What is the price level for Brazilian beans?
price.
Yeah.
Brazil never export black beans, but export brown beans, and preparing to the next years to enter in this market the colored beans, because we depend only two, but we depend a lot the Carioca beans production. 60%, 70% we consume in Brazil every year. And this is dangerous because Carioca only we can produce or take in Brazil. When we have trouble with the weather or something, we don't have from where buy Carioca beans. Then, finally, the government and the other institutions concluding that we need one diversification, okay? Diversification to produce to the people inside country, to the people know better these beans, and maybe when we have it some years, I don't know how many, in some years, we can appear in this market to export these colored beans. But until now, we export brown beans.
Okay, thank you, Marcelo.
For the U.S., you want me to do the U.S. black bean one?
What's that?
The U.S. black bean one?
Yeah.
So this question about the growth of the domestic demand for U.S. black beans, there's kind of a, if you talk to 25 different people, you'll get 25 different answers. And part of it has to do with the way that trade is accounted between the U.S. and Mexico, that a large portion of the black beans that are traded from the U.S. to Mexico are traded under a generic identification. So you don't really know exactly how many black beans are going from the USA to Mexico.
Yeah.
So in the end, what I can say is that if you track the statistics back 25 years, you'll see that there was roughly zero domestic consumption. And if you track it forward, it looks like it's somewhere between 100 and 160,000 tons right now. So exactly this question about what it was last year, I think that's an unobtainable answer. But in a gross sense, it's between 100 and 160,000 tons per year.
Yeah, thank you, Randy, for the explanation, because it is very confusing. We've had, within the industry in the U.S., we've had a lot of debates on what the consumption levels are. Now, this will be a problem because the rest of the world thinks in metric, and we in the U.S. think in hundredweights. So I can express this in hundredweights. You'll have to get your calculators out, but 25, 30 years ago, we estimated you probably used about 500,000 bags of black beans, including there was a lot that had to do with seed and so forth. And today, depending on who you talk to, there's estimates that we're using 3 million bags, 3,600,000 bags, which is a large part of the actual production. That's been stimulated in part by immigration, people that are more used to consuming black beans, along with a lot of promotions by chefs and so forth. When you have a company like Chipotle start producing black beans as an option, and it used to be strictly pinto beans, it's a huge demand. You've had black beans at Taco Bell. This all impacts the domestic consumption. Shall we take a look at the next question? Okay, what is China's expectation quantity for the next crop of light speckled kidney beans?
Well, for light speckled kidney beans long ship for 2018, we estimate 75,000 metric tons. We another have the Xinjiang type, 18,000 metric tons.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How many tons of black beans will Brazil need to import, do you think?
Every year, we import around 100,000 tons from Argentina, sometimes from China. What we need looking for now, or put the attention now, how will be the quantity, the Carioca beans? Mm-hmm. This has some influence too. But we believe now, on this time, 100 1,000 tons.
Well, when you see an increase in the carioca price, and if the black bean price is somewhat level, do you see them switching a little bit in consumption?
Maybe during the April, May, part of June, we have some increase because we losing this part of the carioca beans in Paraná too. And in the second part of the year, we have the beans under irrigation. This area every year is more and more. One estimative some days ago put around 1,500 hectares per month rising the area under irrigation. This can supply maybe this that we lose in carioca beans in the first part of the year.
Okay, good. Thank you. My next question is, what level price do you see for U.S. dark red kidney crop, SIF Europe? Well, really can't say. We're still in the discovery stage. It's not planted. And again, we have a very defensive situation. Not getting a lot of backing by growers. That helps to set the price. When you can back-to-back, you got a grower contract, and you roll that into a sale contract. You still have the risk of an act of God if the crop doesn't come off, but you try to back it up to lock in your margin. If I gave you a wild guess, and I can't give you the ocean freights, I don't have those, but an FOB basis, and that would roll back mainly to Minnesota, it's going to be 1,100, 1,200 a metric ton for openers. And we'll see how that market progresses after the tightness is really felt, and how the prices are with the competitors out there, say coming out of Argentina or someplace like that. So, and that's just a guess. I would not use that for anything. Next question is, what are the price expectations for dark red kidneys, light red kidneys, and cranberry beans from Argentina?
Okay. Price expectations, of course, will depend on the final result of the crop. We can talk about the expectations today, but what will be at the end, of course, who knows that?
I totally agree.
Absolutely. Some people say that maybe God knows that, but in Argentina, even I don't know that. But if we consider what was traded in the last few weeks or months, and if the weather permits, and we are going to reach the volume expected, as mentioned before. The last price traded for the cranberry beans was in the area of $1,300. For the darks was $1,200, and for the light was $1,100. That's what the price traded in the last few weeks, months. So now we have, as I said before, 6 to 8 months to go. If we fulfill the volume expectations and other markets too, I suppose we will remain more or less in the same levels. If something wrong happens, well, things will change.
Oh, yeah.
No offers today, eh?
As they say, it's not really a crop until it's in the barn. Everything else is an estimate.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question is, in regards to quality and volume, how does the Argentinian black bean crop compare 2018 crop versus 2017 crop?
Okay, I can tell you that. I mean, regarding quality issues, at this time I can expect only good quality. There is no any reason to expect something different. So we expect on quality terms will be fine. And regarding the second question is volume. Well, in this case, yes. In this case, I expect that probably volume will be a bit less than last season. Our figures show us that weather permit, Argentina can export more or less around 150,000 tons this year.
Thank you. Next question is, the lack of water in Mexico will be delaying seeding and putting pressure in the market of black beans and pinto beans. I do wish we had a panelist from Mexico to address this, but I think it's a little early yet. As my past experiences with Mexico, planting really won't begin until, and this is the dry land, not the irrigated, will not really begin until the end of June, like the last week or so of June and the first week of July. That's traditional in an area like Zacatecas and Durango and Chihuahua. And there is somewhat of a monsoon season in Mexico. So it's a little early yet to start thinking in terms, will the crop be delayed or not? We have to wait and see how the weather progresses as they actually get to the planting season. This is a question. South Africa is a producer of sugar beans and import Chinese light speckled kidneys, and to a lesser extent, cranberries. Can someone speak to the demand from South Africa?
So I was in South Africa, I guess, in March, and the news was saying that the crop size was going to be smaller, but the drought wound up delaying the corn, and a lot of farmers actually wound up planting more than expected. So as far as the South African crop goes, the local people are saying that the demand in 2018 should be roughly the same as the demand in 2017. So they're looking at pretty steady.
Yeah, I think every year there is a percentage of imported light speckled kidney beans. They still do not produce enough for their annual demand. The one thing I always have a trouble with is what came first, the Chinese light speckled kidney bean or the sugar bean, because they look identical. And nobody can answer that. I asked people in South Africa, and they have no idea. So let's go to the next question. Meng, could you please inform us the main reasons why China exported color beans quantities reducing year by year? What do you think the trend of the local demand?
Because we face adverse the factors affecting the exports. The price, China, the price is high and high, and the quality. Because, you know, several years ago, the quality is much better. But, you know, in China, the planting only, each farmer, they cannot control the seeds quality. The government no any well supporting for this. Also, the government abolished the policy, the subsidies for planting beans. They're now only supporting the soya beans. Just we departure to here, our government have a new rule for the supporting for the planting more soybeans in same produce area with the pulses, the northeast. Because, you know, now we face the big problem with America, the trade war. From the beginning this year, actually, dark red kidney beans, when we harvest the offer to the Europe, no any buyer interested. But domestic market from south of China, they confirmed 80,000 metric tons from the beginning. So everything is changing.
Okay, thank you, Meng. Next question. Though Ethiopia production of colored beans is small, we do have approximately figures for black beans, pinto beans, and light speckled kidney beans, as we see it is exported to Europe. Any idea on that?
Yeah, actually, we have missed another commodity, creamy beans. We call it creamy beans. It's largely produced and mainly meant for the Indian market. And we export to a tune of 7,000 to 10,000 metric tons of this commodity, mainly to India and Pakistan. With black beans, the size is not as good as the other exporters, in fact, exporting countries. But we expect 2,000 to 5,000 metric tons of black beans for export. And when it comes to pinto beans, the volume increases. In fact, it's within the range of 5,000 to 10,000 metric tons. Light speckled kidney beans, 2,000 to 2,000 metric tons. The same is true with red speckled kidney beans as well. We do export to the tune of 2,000 to 3,000 metric tons, mainly to Europe and Middle East as well, in fact.
Thank you very much. Next question, what is the current price indication for new crop dark red kidney beans from Canada? I'm going to skirt around that. It's a lot like the U.S. Dark red kidney beans. We're not quite sure yet. And again, we're dealing with a crop that we already know is going to be very tight. So it's all very speculative, and it's not even planted yet. So we have to wait and see. Light speckled kidney bean round, what the crop size available and why price is so high? Meng, that's another question to you.
I think this question from ask Xinjiang type. For Xinjiang type is especially in planting China. Usually the size we can do the 140 to 155, and price is so high because no any stock. The Iran market is the biggest market from, and the second market for China is Turkey. So no any stock. But this year new crop, the farmer planted so much. So I think this year new crop for 2018, the quantity will double compared with 2017.
Okay, thank you. Our next question seems to be in the same direction. Can you expect what kind of beans China will need to import?
Actually, China this year already imported the chickpeas from India. Also, we import the lentils from USA. It's a new product. Before, our government cannot give any import license for this two type of beans, but now it's open. So I think in the future, Chinese government will release more items just like white beans, dark red kidney beans to China. But actually, many kind of beans enter into China from unofficial. Just let me say it's from Haiphong.
Our next question is, how many metric tons of stock of both, that go on fast? To miss that, because the question we just had was really along the same lines as the previous one. Next question is, are there any measures taken to get a better seed for dark red kidneys and cranberries in Argentina?
Well, this is very important for us because, as I mentioned before, we are working very hard in a process of diversification of varieties, then to improve the seeds and to improve qualities and mass for us. For the time being, there are efforts only by private sector and for exporters to do their best to improve seeds on several ways. But this is also the process of working with our authorities in order to save some bureaucracy for that, and in a joint between the private sector and the government is doing a work to improve seeds, not only for these varieties, but all varieties of Argentine beans. It's one of the top priorities of Argentine sector to improve seeds.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question. China origin light speckled kidney beans, round and long shape. What's the size now left and why so expensive?
Size just now I say is 150 to 155 available if depend on the good weather. But now Xinjiang type no any stock. For American type is still have 1,000 metric tons stock. For long shape we still keep 8,000 metric tons.
So as far as the price on those goes, I guess as I talk to Indian traders, the Indians have probably a market that's still able to buy 250,000 tons of China light speckled kidney bean long shape. So the Indians are happy to take 250,000 tons per year, and China has only produced 80,000 tons. So obviously the price is going to be high.
But actually now for long shape the price is down, not high. Because you know this month compared with the last month for India market, the price drop down is $150 per ton.
Okay, the next question we have, what is the price outlook for brown-eye beans this year? We'll direct that to Marcelo.
Until now, the crop is starting if delayed this year, and some deals that happened was around 550. We tried with the growers less than this, but less than this is below the cost. And we know when you are in the cost or below the cost, the market is stopped. Yeah. It's impossible continues the market. Then is near this number to start more volume. Until now, the India and the Pakistan is out of the market. I believe waiting to see what will be the real price to them buy.
Okay, thank you, Marcelo. We'll go to the next question. How much stock of light speckled kidney beans is there in China as on date, and how's the new crop seeding?
Just now, I speak for total is longship is 80,000 metric tons stock, and for American round ship is 1,000 metric tons stock in China keep. For the seeds, we also hope to get the supporting from Ministry of Agriculture, but now still no big change in China.
Okay, thank you, Meng. This looks like a repeat. Mr. Marcelo, production and what is the price outlook for brown eyes this year, which I believe you covered on the last one. Maybe a volume? I don't think we touched on volume.
We believe the volume, total volume will be like last year, around the 400,000 tons. But we need to remember all time that we have one domestic market. And domestic market consume around 300,000 tons. This is the picture there. What happened in the recent years? Every year we have more and more countries buying because the growers and the researchers work hard there to produce something very good, the quality, the good quality, good size. And this year we have more mung beans, we have more one diversification with black beans, black eye beans. To them, it's probable this will help this diversification to press less the prices in brown eye beans. And other countries appearing, I believe this is good for all.
Okay. Thank you, Marcelo. I think one last question. We're running out of time here. For Argentina, with the decrease of export duty on soybeans, Argentina will grow less beans in the future. What's your opinion on that?
No, I don't
Jose
think so.
Marie?
I don't think so. That first of all, the decrease of duty export on soybeans is gradually. It's not a shock. We reduce gradually every year, so it takes some time to finalize. Then you cannot plant soybeans everywhere. So, and the beans production, where they are planted in Argentina, is a very important production for that area. We call them in a bad Spanish translation, some regional economic. And for that area, beans is like a way of life. So I don't expect any reduction. On the contrary, I expect that if we can increase quality and the markets join us, we can only expect to grow.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking down at the clock here, I think we've reached the very end. I'm showing 24 seconds. So this will be the conclusion of the color beam panel. I'd like to thank everybody on the panel. You all have done an excellent job. And I'd like to thank again Randy for the presentation. So that's it for the color beam panel for this year. Thank you all.
Thank you, gentlemen, for finishing on time.